Big flakes were falling when I found a 7-year-old by the pay kiosk with a photo of me and his dying mom. He said, "Brent told me to wait by the cars. Someone kind would pick me up." I wrapped my arms around him and felt my world shift completely. As a fleet driver, making decent money, but nothing spectacular, I thought I was just clocking out of another ordinary shift. I had no idea I was about to discover I had a son, or that the next few weeks would turn me into someone I didn't recognize. The kid was shivering in an oversized green parka, clutching a shark backpack like it contained everything he owned. When he handed me that crumpled envelope with trembling fingers, I saw the photo inside and my stomach dropped. Me and Colette, maybe 15 years ago, both of us young and stupid and in love, on the back in her neat handwriting. "This is your father?" Simon was 7.5, he told me proudly, like that half year mattered more than anything in the world. And maybe tonight, it did. I got him into my beat-up Civic, cranked what little heat the thing could produce, and called the only person I trusted completely. Bryn answered on the first ring, voice calm and measured like always. She's a realtor who handles high-end properties, the kind of woman who can negotiate million-dollar deals while making coffee and never miss a beat. "Don't freak," I told her. "I've got a kid here, might be mine." Without hesitation, she said, "Bring him home. We'll figure out the paperwork tomorrow." That response told me everything I needed to know about why I'd been planning to propose to Bryn next month. She didn't panic, didn't ask 100 questions, just immediately shifted into problem-solving mode. When we got to our apartment, she was waiting at the door in her socks, paint-stained t-shirt, hair clipped up with a pen. She took one look at Simon and knelt down to his eye level. "I'm Bryn. This is our place. It's small, but it's warm." Simon whispered, "Hi," so softly I almost missed it, but Bryn heard. She handed him hot chocolate in a mug with a faded baseball on the side and started making grilled cheese like she'd been planning for his arrival all day. I pulled out the envelope again and found a second piece of paper I'd missed in my shock. A letter from Colette, handwriting shaky but still recognizable. "Read. If he finds you, trust it. I'm sick. Brent says I'm lying. Simon's yours. I know math. I know your face. I'm sorry for how I left." The name Brent hit me like a physical blow. I remembered him from years ago when Colette and I were together. Broad shoulders, fake smile, the kind of guy who made everything a competition he had to win. He'd always hated that Colette chose me over him, at least temporarily. Apparently he'd gotten his chance after all. And now he was dumping my son at a parking lot like garbage because Colette was inconveniently dying. I called in sick the next morning and started making the kind of strategic moves you learn when you've spent years watching other people's crises from the driver's seat. First call, St. Isidore's Hospital, asking for Colette by her maiden name. Room 527, oncology ward, visiting hours start at 8 a.m. Second call, my mom, Irene, who'd raised 3 kids mostly alone and knew how to handle emergencies. Third call, a family lawyer I'd driven to court dates, Marcus Webb, who owed me a few favors. Marcus's advice was immediate and professional. Document everything, get paternity established, file for emergency custody before this Brent character tries something stupid. And read, don't let emotions drive your decisions. This is about protecting that boy, not settling old scores. But even as he said it, I could hear the anger in his voice. Marcus had 2 kids of his own, and the idea of someone abandoning a child made him furious. The hospital visit broke something open in my chest. Colette looked like a shadow of herself, thin and gray, but her eyes still had that spark I remembered. When Simon ran to her bedside, she managed to sit up and wrap her arms around him, like she'd been saving her strength for exactly this moment. She looked at me over his head and whispered, "You came." Not like she was surprised, but like she'd been hoping against hope that I would. "We've got him," I told her, and meant it. "He's safe. Whatever paperwork needs signing, whatever legal hoops we need to jump through, we'll handle it." She nodded and gave me 3 non-negotiable instructions. Keep him away from Brent, don't let her parents use him as a holiday photo prop, and save her sketchbooks for him. Then she handed Simon a manila folder filled with her drawings, telling him, "These are for your museum of memory at home." That's when Brent showed up. I heard his voice before I saw him, loud and obnoxious, filling the hallway with his fake concern. "She does this, pretends to be sick, So that's her game. He was leaning against the window in Colette's room, like he owned the place, wearing a cheap jacket and a baseball cap that looked like he'd won it at a bar trivia night. The man hadn't changed in 15 years, still the same entitled asshole who thought the world owed him something. When he saw me, his whole demeanor shifted. "You can't take that, boy," he said, stepping close enough that I could smell the stale beer on his breath. "I fed him. I picked him up from school. I've paid for everything while she drew cartoons and made excuses. You think you can just show up and play daddy now?" That's when I realized Brent had made a critical miscalculation. He thought I was still the same broke kid who'd driven delivery trucks and lived paycheck to paycheck. He had no idea that I'd spent the last 5 years building something solid. My fleet supervisor position paid $52,000 a year with full benefits. I had $18,000 in savings, a clean credit score, and references from local business people I'd driven who respected my professionalism. More importantly, I had Bryn, whose real estate connections included half the family lawyers in the city. "I'm not playing anything," I told him calmly. "And he's not your leverage." The nurse intervened before things could escalate, but not before Brent made it clear he wasn't giving up without a fight. As security escorted him out, he threw me a look that promised this wasn't over. But I was already 3 steps ahead. That afternoon, I drove back to the Oak Ridge lot, where I'd found Simon and talked to Mateo, the security guard. The cameras had caught everything. Brent dragging Simon out of his car, shoving the backpack at him, pointing at the kiosk, and driving away without a backward glance. Mateo burned the footage to a flash drive and printed me a still frame with the timestamp clearly visible. Physical evidence of child abandonment, documented and undeniable. Marcus reviewed the footage and smiled grimly. "This is exactly what we need. Child abandonment, especially caught on camera, plays very badly in family court. Combined with your stable employment and housing situation, you're in an excellent position." He filed emergency custody papers that same day, and we had a hearing scheduled within 48 hours. Meanwhile, Bryn was working her own angles. As a realtor handling high-end properties, she'd built relationships with everyone, from mortgage brokers to family counselors. She made 3 calls and had us connected with Dana Riggs, the county's most experienced child services investigator, plus a family therapist who specialized in children from traumatic situations. "This isn't just about winning legally," she explained. "It's about showing we can provide the stability Simon needs long-term." The custody hearing felt like stepping into a different world. Brent showed up late, looking disheveled, with some story about how he'd been Simon's primary caregiver for 5 years. But when Dana asked him to explain the security footage, he fell apart. "I wasn't abandoning him," he stammered. I knew someone would find him." The judge's expression made it clear what she thought of that explanation. Meanwhile, our documentation painted a clear picture. I had steady employment, health insurance, a clean apartment, and a support system. Bryn had already connected us with Simon's future school district and arranged for counseling services. My mom had cleared her schedule to provide childcare when needed. We looked like responsible adults who'd planned for this responsibility, while Brent looked like exactly what he was, someone who dumped a kid when things got inconvenient. The judge awarded us temporary custody immediately, with supervised visitation rights for Brent, pending a full investigation. But the real victory came when Simon spoke up. In his small, clear voice, he told the judge, "I want to stay with my dad and Bryn. They kept me warm." That was it. Case closed. Over the next few weeks, I watched Brent's life unravel in real time. Without Simon as a bargaining chip, his relationship with Colette's parents crumbled. They'd been supporting him financially, believing his story about being Simon's devoted stepfather. When they learned the truth about the abandonment, the money stopped immediately. His part-time construction job barely covered his rent, and losing that family support hit him hard. But the consequences went deeper than money. Word spread through our neighborhood about what he'd done. The local community, especially parents, were disgusted by his actions. His landlord, a family man himself, found reasons to make Brent's lease renewal difficult. The few friends he'd had started avoiding him. In a tight-knit working-class community, abandoning a child marked him as someone fundamentally untrustworthy. Meanwhile, Simon was thriving. Bryn had transformed part of our living room into what she called his museum of memory. displaying Colette's artwork in simple frames along with his own drawings. He started calling her mom naturally, without prompting, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. When I heard it the first time, baking cookies together on a snowy afternoon, I had to step outside for a minute to process the emotion. My mom, Irene, became Grammy within days, teaching Simon card games and bringing him apple slices with cinnamon every time she visited. She had lost one grandchild to my brother's messy divorce years ago, and having Simon around brought out a protective fieriness in her that I'd forgotten existed. When Colette's parents tried to assert grandparent rights through their lawyer, Irene showed up to court with a folder full of documentation about Simon's adjustment and progress, prepared to fight anyone who threatened his stability. The final legal victory came 6 weeks later. Colette had passed away peacefully with Simon and me beside her, after weeks of daily hospital visits where she got to see him flourishing in our care. Her parents, who'd ignored her for years and contributed nothing to Simon's well-being, tried to claim custody based on family stability and financial resources. Their lawyer, a sharp woman in expensive clothes, argued that Simon deserved the advantages their wealth could provide. But Marcus had prepared for this exact scenario. He presented evidence of their years-long estrangement from Colette, their complete absence from Simon's life, and their attempt to use wealth as a substitute for actual relationship. More damaging was their association with Brent. They'd supported his custody claims right up until the abandonment footage became public. The judge was unimpressed with people who'd ignored a child for 7 years, suddenly claiming grandparent rights because tragedy made it convenient. The final custody ruling was comprehensive and permanent. Simon would remain with Bryn and me, with no visitation rights for Brent, and only supervised visits for Colette's parents if Simon chose to see them. The judge noted in her ruling that Simon had found stability and love in his current placement, and that disrupting it would serve only the adult's interests, not the child's. 6 months later, our life had settled into a rhythm I'd never imagined possible. Simon had his own bedroom now, painted blue with rocket ships, and a desk where he did homework every afternoon. Bryn had used her real estate connections to find us a larger apartment in a better school district, and I'd been promoted to fleet supervisor with a raise that made the move possible. My old job driving nights felt like something from another life. Brent, meanwhile, had essentially disappeared from our orbit. The child abandonment charge on his record made finding decent employment difficult, and his reputation in the community never recovered. He'd moved to a cheaper apartment across town and picked up odd jobs, but the comfortable life he'd enjoyed as Colette's supported boyfriend was permanently gone. Sometimes I'd hear updates through mutual acquaintances. He was bitter, angry, blaming everyone but himself for his situation. I felt no satisfaction in his downfall, just relief that Simon would never have to depend on him again. The real victory wasn't legal or financial. It was watching Simon bloom into himself. He'd gone from a scared, abandoned child to a confident kid who brought drawings home from school and asked for help with math homework. He called me Dad without hesitation and hugged Bryn goodnight every evening. When people asked about his family, he'd talk about his mom at home, his Grammy who made the best cookies, and his other mom who lived in the drawings on his wall but loved him very much. One evening, as we sat around the kitchen table helping Simon with a school project about families, he looked up and asked, "Dad, am I lucky?" I thought about everything: the snow, the parking lot, the fear and anger and legal battles, the way love can appear in the most unexpected places. "Yeah, buddy," I told him. "I think we all are." And for the first time in my adult life, I absolutely meant it.